Is Huel dampening?
Computer says no.
What about sprouting and dampness? What about is sprouting your grains dampening or drying, and what does that do to them, and why is that the case? The types of dampness and dryness, and they were asking about damp heat and dry cold dryness and heat dryness and things like that. We're going to answer that one. And then the last one we're going to talk about is a thing called GU syndrome, and someone's got a question about that. Hi, welcome back to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. I'm Marie Hopkinson. I'm an acupuncturist and a Chinese herbalist, and today we're going to be answering some subscribers' questions about different things about Chinese medicine. So if you've asked a question lately, your answer is hopefully here. And there's quite a few things around the topic of dampness and digestion and just understanding Chinese medicine in a different way. So today we're going to be talking about is Huel dampening? Now, this is a new product that I've never heard of, and someone had asked that question, so I've done a little bit of research on that. The types of dampness and dryness, and they were asking about damp heat and dry cold dryness and heat dryness and things like that. We're going to answer that one. What about sprouting and dampness? What about is sprouting your grains dampening or drying, and what does that do to them, and why is that the case? And then the last one we're going to talk about is a thing called GU syndrome, and someone's got a question about that, and that also is related to dampness as well. So there's a lot of people with dampness, which doesn't surprise me because it's a very common problem, and just it's probably something that's persistent. It carries on a long time, and it just, it's hard to get rid of. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these things. So hopefully you are, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Thanks so much for all the positive comments we've got on the channel lately. I really love hearing people's feedback. I love hearing that it's helping you. Questions that you've got about different things about Chinese medicine, please ask your questions. I will do my best to answer those. I hope you're doing well. I know it's a difficult time in the world. It's going from one crazy to another crazy in just so many different ways. And I hope that you're well. I hope you're safe. I hope you're doing good in life, and that you're here to learn about Chinese medicine and to discover some things about yourself. So is Huel dampening? Let's talk about this first question. So what this person wants to do is put this into like a type of a protein powder. Let me have a quick look at this thing. So it's like a shake ingredient that they that they are using, and they were just asking that they said they are having that and they feel good having it, but is it dampening? Now, there's something that's really important with Chinese medicine. I think I've probably mentioned this a few times. It's not so much about the one thing in isolation as it also is about that one thing in the context of everything else that you're doing. So if you're generally having a really healthy diet and you have some dampening foods here or there, that doesn't automatically cause you to get dampness. It doesn't automatically cause you to have a massive issue, to have a massive problem. And I think also the more aware you are, and it seems lots of people who comment here are aware, which is great, and lots of patients that I see, they might have started out their journey not being so aware, but then as you ask them those questions, and hopefully as your acupuncturist or your herbalist has asked you some questions about, how's your bowels, do you have belching, do you have gas, do you have this or that? Often patients I see, they don't say yes to those things, or they just say they don't know. And then they come back the week later and they say, you know what, Marie, I was thinking about it during the week, and they're like, yeah, I do have gas, I do have bloating, I do have acidic regurgitation or belching, or I do have pain in this certain area, like, under their ribs or something like that. They just didn't notice before you'd ask them the question, because we get busy, I get busy, we get on with our life, and we don't kind of focus on every single thing that's going on in our bodies. So as you are more aware and as you're focused on your diet, let's say, you're probably going to become more aware of what that food is doing to you. And that's a good indication of whether you can deem something to be dampening or not. So if something's dampening, you'll inevitably get symptoms of not digesting very well. Like you'll get things like, so the typical dampness symptoms are like that cloudy headedness, or foggy headedness, heavy limbs, feeling lethargic, feeling bloated, things like that. And something that happens as well with your digestion, I'll give you a little example from myself as an example. So I've been on a diet for the last month of a keto-based kind of, basically a paleo diet, but trying to do the keto version of a paleo diet. So I don't have a lot of sugars in terms of fruits, and you don't have sugar on a paleo diet anyway. And certainly no bread. Now, I love bread. I could eat bread till the cows come home. I just love bread. And so before this diet, I would probably every day have 1 or 2 slices of bread with my avocado on toast. You know, not every day for breakfast, but that's what I was having leading up to this diet. And certainly living in the house, in the isolation, that's my, you know, go-to kind of yummy breakfast. You got time to kind of enjoy it, sit there in your house and eat it when we weren't going to work as often. And so I didn't really think anything of it. I didn't feel bloated after eating that bread because I was eating a lot of other carbs. I was eating pasta. I was eating all kinds of other carbs and things like that. Now, I've done this paleo diet before. What made me stop it in the past was just the annoyance of having to cook all the time and have to be so organised, let's say. And I was just super busy back then. I mean, I'm busy now, but I was probably a bit busier then as well. And anyway, this isn't a rant about me, but I just want to give you this example. So I haven't had any bread for a whole month. Now, on the weekend, I went away with my sister and we had a really nice time by the beach. We had a little beach house for a week and I stayed there for 3 days with her. And so the first couple of days, we were like, yes, I was going to have a cheat day. I was going to have a cheat meal and have my breakfast. Now, I had everything I would normally have, except I had a piece of bread with it. So I had some eggs on toast with some spinach and I had some holiday sauce. Now, I don't have holiday sauce at, you know, home, but I've been eating dairy, so it's not like it wasn't that. It was the bread. And I ate this meal and honestly, it wasn't a big thing. It was a tiny, well, not tiny, but one piece of bread, right? Not like a loaf of bread, not heaps of bread. After we ate that bread, I felt so bloated, like way more bloated and way like, I never feel bloated after breakfast, you know, this whole month, right? And before this month, if you'd asked me, do you feel bloated after eating bread? I would have said no. The reason why I'm giving you that example is because when you don't have something for a while, your body becomes more aware of it, right? And sometimes we're putting these toxic things into our body or things that are not so great or not so hard. They're hard to digest. And you probably find this with sugar as well. And I had someone comment recently about that. You know, I mentioned when you give up sugar, it's hard at the start, but then after a few weeks, you just don't really crave it anymore. You don't miss it anymore. But then once you're back on the sugar train, you've got to have more and more and more to kind of satisfy that craving. And it's the same kind of thing with this. So once you have a little bit of it, you really notice the effects of it, and then your body kind of gets used to it, and you know, you just don't notice it, or maybe you're just bloated all the time and you don't notice those symptoms. That's how you feel, and sometimes you go onto a new diet and you think you change your dietary habits, let's say, and then you suddenly don't feel bloated and you didn't realize you were. You just feel better, you just feel cleaner, you feel like you eliminate, you know, your bowels more or something like that. So that can happen, and it's not a bad thing to be aware of your body, but it's also a good thing to just be aware that in Chinese medicine, not everything is absolute. Like this causes dampness, and if I have one thing of it, then I've got dampness. And your ability to digest that, or whether that food causes you detriment or not, has a lot to do with the health of your digestive system when you start. So a younger person, not a smaller person, a person who's younger has more yang than someone who's older, just because that's how we age. When we age, we lose yang, and so we just lose our digestive function. We don't have as much fire, or let's say, spleen yang to kind of digest the food. And so you can't get away with eating as much toxic stuff without it causing you some kind of detriment. Now, for some people, they get acidic regurgitation or belching or bloating, like stomach kind of symptoms in Chinese medicine. Some people get more spleeny kind of symptoms. So they get more, like when I say spleeny, I don't mean the Western medicine spleen, I mean your digestive earth element spleen. And they get more like diarrhea, loose stools, or that bloated feeling, or that, you know, that foggy headed. And those are typically your digestive system not working well with the dampness. So sometimes when I answer these questions, I want to give you the answer, but there isn't just like one exact answer. Like, is this thing going to cause me dampness? And that's what this person's kind of said. They've said, I eat this food and I feel good. I feel good having it, but they have a feeling it's dampening. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about this product, and what, like, so from an example of what's in it. Now, not particularly this product, but all products similar to this, what you have to watch out for, and it seems like this product doesn't have too much of that, is preservatives and when you've got lots of dried protein things. So this has got pea protein, ground flaxseed, brown rice protein, tapioca starch, sunflower oil powder, coconut oil, organic coconut sugar, sorry, natural vanilla flavoring, blah, 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 and just some other stuff like that. So when you have a lot of concentrated nutrition, then the good side of that is if you are a deficient person, or let's say going to live on the moon where there's no plants and you can't grow food, and so you need that concentrated nutrition from somewhere, or you're going to live in a place where you cannot grow your food or you can't get access to fresh food, then this would be perfect because you're going to be able to get the nutrients. There's other ingredients in this product and it seems to give you lots of vitamins and minerals and things like that. And so sometimes whether these things are healthy for us or beneficial for us can be dependent on what's the alternative to having that. If the alternative to having this as your morning breakfast would be something that is also quick and easy, like a sugary cereal, for instance, well, this is obviously heaps better. And if you are in a stage of life where you just don't have the time and you've got no other choice in a way, then, you know, on one side of things, people would say, well, you need to make a choice. You need to make time for that. And yes, that's true. That's good to be able to do that. But at the same time, you have to be pragmatic and think, you know, maybe you're just going through a really busy season of life and those kind of nutritional supplemental foods could be useful for you. If you know you're deficient in certain nutrients, then they may be also useful for you as well. But another thing to watch out for, and this is something that other medicine systems don't talk about much, but it's a big part of Chinese medicine. And this is where the dampening aspect of these highly concentrated products kind of come in. So one is, because it's dried, you've lost the freshness aspect of it. So it's stronger. The flavor is stronger. The nature of it's stronger. So it's much more like a medicinal substance than a food substance, right? As soon as you've dried something, it just becomes stronger. So be careful that you don't overuse something or overconsume. Now, detrimentally, you can overdose on certain things because it may, when you're, detrimentally, you can overdose on certain things in a way, in a Western medicine way, it'd be like, okay, your liver or your kidney can't, digest the toxins from that digestive process and they get overloaded and, in a severe case, a person might overdose on a medication, or this has even happened with natural medicines where people have taken so much of something. They read on the packet and they think, oh, this is really good. I'll take twice as much, and they take it for a long period of time, or they just or they don't realize that they're having that product in something else and something else, and they're taking so much, and that also causes us detriment. So this idea of your spleen and stomach as the cooking pot on the stove is really essential to kind of understand. And if you're already watching this channel, I'm sure you've seen me bang on about that many times before, but you've probably also seen that video that I made called Why Eat Mostly Cooked Foods, and that's kind of the understanding background, the essential background to Chinese diet therapy or Chinese medicine, understanding of our digestive system. So to answer this question about this Huel product, it could be beneficial to someone who's if you're nutrient deficient, but if you are consuming a lot of nutrients and you don't need that, then it depends on what else you consume in the day. So if you're just having that and you're kind of on a fasting diet and you're able to have minimal calories, this could be a really useful product for you to have. But if you're consuming this and you're having all these other things, and that's when you can either consume too many calories or too much nutrients. And in a Chinese medicine sense, what does that do? Well, it overwhelms the spleen and stomach, and it means that this idea of everything you put in has to be digested. So there's another fundamental thing in Chinese medicine that we often say, which is controversial, about drinking too much water. So when this is kind of the fight between naturopaths and Chinese medicine practitioners, I guess, in a way. On one hand, people are told, drink as much water as you possibly can. Like, people don't drink enough water. You've got to drink enough water. You've got to drink 2 litres of water a day or 3 litres of water a day, or whatever the designated amount is, right? And some people go on a diet where they need to drink way, way more, so much water. Again, everything you put in has to be digested, and that digestive process consumes yang. So it consumes your body's warmness, your heat. So when you urinate, you don't urinate water, you urinate urine. Now, urine's made of water, but your body had to make it. So if you're drinking so much water and just weeing all the time, then you're using up a lot of your body's digestive process for what kind of gain. That's the kind of thing you have to ask. Now, it's not a healthy thing to tell people you should just stop drinking water. Like, I don't tell my patients just don't drink water. But the idea of it is, think of it as a balance. Like, one thing is, if you're getting up at night to go to the toilet to wee, then that's a problem, and we need to address that. And this is where you need to kind of go and see your practitioner. It's not like something you can just get off a YouTube video and, you need to address that with your practitioner, because there are lots of reasons why you might be getting up at night to urinate. But if you've just started a diet and you weren't doing that before and you suddenly increased your water, you're having 3 litres of water a day on top of your other liquids, on top of coffee, on top of other things, or very watery kinds of foods, you might be consuming too much liquid, and then your body's having to produce more urine than it needs to. So why am I saying that example? Just to back up this idea about the Huel question, everything you put in your body has to be digested, and so just being aware of that balance between stuff that's things that are nutrient dense, or things that are like this is the same with vitamins and things like that. Like, just because it's good for you doesn't mean it's good for you to take more and more of it, or to take heaps and heaps of it. So in a perfect world, you would get all your nutrients from fruit and vegetables. You get all your nutrients from the foods that you eat. Now, we don't live in a perfect world anymore, and there's lots of countries, including where I live in Australia, where the nutrients in the soil aren't that great in all of the areas. So you don't know. You might be eating a capsicum, and it's, even if you grow the capsicum at home in your own garden, like, you don't know whether that capsicum, is it the same as a capsicum that would have been grown like 50 years ago? Probably not. Like, if your soil is minerally deficient, then, unless you're really getting into the permaculture and you're testing your soil and all that kind of stuff, which is great if you're doing that. And if you're in a community that's doing that, I think that's where, where we have to go. That's a good idea. And that in that case, then no, you don't need to take lots of vitamin supplements and things like that. So hopefully that's the answer that answers your question. Not necessarily the answer you're looking for. So yeah, I mean, I guess in a way, I don't think that product is excessively dampening. It doesn't. The other thing you want to look out for is, does it have a lot of artificial sweeteners in it? And it seems like it's got lots of different kinds of sweeteners there, but there again, they seem to be powdered forms. Like it said, it's even got kombucha powder as a sweetener. So artificial sweeteners, again, are, big time no-nos in Chinese medicine. Like, that's definitely going to cause you detriment to your spleen. And again, this is when something has a sweet flavour. Yeah, okay, if it comes from raw sugar, it's worse for your body than other sources, but it's still sweet. So that sweet flavour still has that impact on the spleen, no matter, like, if you taste it to be sweet, it still has that impact on your spleen, and possibly even a more of a detrimental impact when it's, let's say, a fake sugar. Because raw sugar, like sugar cane, molasses, that kind of level of sugar, actually has a functional aspect to it as well. Like, it's used in Chinese medicine to tonify, and I don't think those artificial sugars can even tonify. So is there any benefit to kind of taking it apart from the flavour of it? So yeah, lots of companies put that stuff in there because they want to reduce the calories, so they're selling the product as a low carb product, but it still tastes good, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't think that Huel product is dampening in the context of the other stuff you're having in the diet. And certainly if you're having that and it's lasting you, till after lunch or something like that, and you're getting that energy and you're not having to snack in the morning and you feel sustained and you're feeling good, I mean, the main thing to do would be to check your bowels. Like, if your bowels are getting looser and you feel bloated and you feel lethargic and tired, well, they're signs of dampness. If you're not feeling those things, then it's probably not causing you dampness. So this person, SI, has said, if I'm correct, you can have hot dampness, cold dampness, hot dryness, and cold dryness. So yeah, in Chinese medicine, we differentiate. So I'm not talking about classical Chinese medicine now, just talking about TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. We differentiate the 6 pathogenic factors. So wind, cold, heat, dryness, fire, dampness, those things from the environment that can come in and cause illness or cause a disharmony. So it's a disharmony between our body and the environment. And so sometimes those pathogenic factors can combine. So it depends on where you live. Some people, like I live in Perth, Western Australia, we don't get a lot of dampness in the environment here. We do sometimes, like it's not a humid climate. The other side of Australia in Queensland, it's very humid, right? And this, like, you'll know if you live in a humid climate because you can easily sweat. But because in Perth where I live, it's a very much more of a dry climate, and it tends to be a dry, hot climate. So what happens is with the pathogenic factors is dryness is often caused because of the wind. Like, so if it's a very windy place, that wind erodes. Like if you think about the wind eroding the soil, that in itself is what's causing the dryness. So if there's wind around, that'll generally cause dryness. But also the lack of humidity in a place. Like, so if you've ever been to a place that's hot and dry, it's almost so hot that it's scorching your throat when you breathe. It's just hot and dry. You feel like you need to sip water all the time. So if you go into a moist and warm place, like in Queensland in summertime, or places in Asia, like those countries can feel the air feels really thick. It's not sort of burning you, but it feels thick. It feels cloudy because of the humidity. So that's all true. Sounds like you're studying Chinese medicine, so that's good. Hopefully that's helping you. He or she's asking, one of the coldest herbs in TCM is winter melon. Yeah, and why is it cold? Why is winter melon cold? Is because of the bitter. So bitter's a flavour, and that bitter flavour makes things descend, and that tends to have a cold type of action. So if you had a lot of bitter melon, you'd probably end up winter melon, sorry. I think they also call it bitter melon. Yeah, sorry. So winter melon, just had to double check that. It's not watermelon. But watermelon is a very cooling thing. But winter melon's very cold or cooling because it's bitter, and that bitter descends, and that, could cause a purging kind of effect. And that would be used if someone had extreme amount of heat, like they had dysentery, kind of eaten some bad food and got like damp heat, diarrhea, then you could use those kind of bitter cooling natured things to like purge and open. And you'd only use that for a day or so, because then it would have its effect and you wouldn't need to take it anymore. It's not something that you should consume over long periods of time, because it could cause them sort of detriment. One of the driest herbs in TCM is poria. That's what he's asking. That's fulling. Fulling, where are you? Probably not here. It's in the other room. So fulling is a white herb, but it's not the most drying herb. How herbs, fulling's like sweet, not as bitter. So if you've got something that's like baiju or kungju is kind of probably more drying. Like kungju is much more drying than the baiju. They're similar herbs. So you're on the money that it is a drying herb. It kind of acts like taking the pressure off of the spleen and stomach to make it work better. So if you have a lot of dampness, you need to get something in there and soak up the damp. Fulling does that, but because of its sweet nature, it kind of helps the spleen do it, like it tonifies the spleen, and kind of use to soak up the damp or the moisture or the wetness. It's like when you have too much of a water kind of pattern in a patient, we use fulling to treat that. Pork tends to be wet. Yeah, well, pork's a very fatty kind of meat, so it's always criticised in TCM for being like dampening. And again, it depends on what other stuff you have. And I think with this kind of thing, you want to think about what part of the meat you're having. If you're having the fat, like a pork, what's that, crackle. I made a crackle the other day, and I didn't know it was gonna make my whole oven become like a fat zone. Like it was all just fatty everywhere because I'm doing this paleo diet and I was getting sick of the standard thing. So I was like, I'm gonna make one of these pork crackles with the meat underneath was really yummy, and the pork crackle was yummy as well. I didn't eat very much of it, but it made my oven a big mess. Anyway, so yes, that's true. Chicken tends to be dry. It's drier. There's less fat on it. And the other thing is to think about, what is that animal doing? If that animal's a small bird that's running around all day, it's a leaner kind of meat, and that's why it's drier meat. Yeah, so I wouldn't say chicken's dry. It's not as moist. It's as again, the cuts. It's not as fatty as pork. Not as moist as pork. And rice is neutral. Yep, so you're all right there. I don't know if you're doing a test or something, or you're just checking. So that was one thing. Now, another question we had was about sprouting and dampness. So this question says, thank you for all your videos. Since each level of processing increases dampness, this is as a response to one of my videos about stop dampness with these foods. Does this also apply to sprouting grains or seeds like quinoa? Likewise, what's the impact of sprouted nuts to someone with damp heat, which manifests in the skin? So this is a really good question, and I probably misled someone on that video, possibly by saying every level of processing increases dampness. And so what I meant by that is like commercial processing, or well, I think one thing, sprouting isn't, I wouldn't consider sprouting to be processing, but maybe you do. So sorry if I've misled someone thinking that, but what I meant by every level of processing is, so let's say you have a grain and then you grind it into a flour, and then you use that flour in a cake, and then you cook that cake, and especially when you add, you mix carbohydrates with sugars, then becomes even more kind of dampening and probably delicious, mixing it with fat and blah, blah, blah. So the combining of foods sometimes is what's causing it to be dampening. So sprouting actually would do the opposite, and I think I kind of answered the question a little bit on there in a written form, but I'll kind of explain it a little bit more in this video. So how you want to eat to avoid dampness or to reduce damp is to one is if we can lessen the impact on the digestive system itself. So things that you eat that are easier to digest mean that your spleen works less hard. Its job is easier to digest, to transform and transport. And how do you know it's working good, working well? Because you don't have the diarrhea, because your bowels are getting more properly formed, because your bowels are regular, like let's say you had constipation, not diarrhea, or you're skipping days or something like that, the bowels would become more normal and you wouldn't feel bloated and things like that, so you'd know that that's kind of working. And the other thing you could do is eat more foods that contain yang and less yin in that way. And so this is what sprouting does. It kind of activates the yang in that, it's like eating the first growth of that food, which is like all the yang of the food. So sprouting is actually a good thing. You could probably get carried away if you had a lot of sprouting grains and they were just raw, juicy smoothies. Like, I don't know where this person's from, but in Australia we used to have this company that was doing juices all the time, and like it was just very popular for a while. People like every day just having a big wheatgrass juice, and wheatgrass went through that popular craze. And I used to grow wheatgrass in my house. Like I just used to have a little wheatgrass thing, and you just kind of cut off the wheatgrass. You can have that every so often, but if you're having that all the time and it's you're consuming lots of raw, then that could be dampening. But if you're sprouting the grains and then you're stir frying them, or then you're cooking them in some way, that's perfect. That's a great way to avoid dampness and help your spleen and stomach. So yeah, that's good. That's a good question, and that's a good one. So then the last one I'm going to answer today is talking about GU syndrome and your gut health. And this is so I'm going to read this question. He says, I've been going to an acupuncturist for about a year now, and I was told that I show signs of damp and GU syndrome with a question mark, GU syndrome. I think this is based on a puffy tongue with teeth marks, general fatigue, bloating, and loose stools. The dampness has persisted despite different herb formulations, and despite the fact that I cook nearly all of my food, mostly plants, moderate meat, no alcohol, generally an anti-damp diet. And that does sound like a great diet. That sounds good. So I think I already said that. Keep doing that diet. I've had these symptoms getting worse over the past few years, and I'm starting to get discouraged because I feel like I'm truly doing all the lifestyle changes I can. Have you ever seen something so persistent, and have you ever heard of GU? Thank you. So there's lots of different styles of Chinese medicine, and some practitioners tend to go towards different ways of methodology of diagnosis and others different ones. So it's not a common diagnostic treatment, so not a common diagnosis, I guess, that would be given. Some practitioners would just still think of it as spleen qi deficiency. And sometimes what happens, I think this happens a lot in Western countries, is people have obviously a limited amount of money and a limited amount of time they're willing to give this stuff. I've got some patients that I've seen for years and years for the same problem, not every week for all those times, but over that time they kind of manage it with herbs, and in general those patients would be getting better. They wouldn't be getting worse, because people won't keep coming in if it's getting worse, because of the money, because of the time. Why would they keep spending a lot of money on something unless they had good faith in, they must have had some symptoms getting better, or they must have had some kind of result or something happen along that time. And sometimes I think if you look back on your journey, you might have started with a huge amount of health problems, and maybe some of the main things might not seem to have resolved, but sometimes those things are getting better a little bit, and that's enough for people to keep going on with the treatment. And so sometimes what also happens is patients, they might get to sort of 3 months into it, and because they're not getting a result, they go to another practitioner, and then they do 3 months with that person, and then or a few weeks with that person, and then they don't get a result, they move to another person. So I don't know if that's your case. I'm not saying. Oh, just kicked the camera. Shit. So I don't know if that's your case, and I'm not saying that is, but I'm just trying to give a broader perspective for people watching this, that sometimes the case can be that you just haven't given the treatment long enough for it to work, or you're not taking the right formula. There might be different systems of Chinese medicine that you could try. That would be something else. So what is the GU syndrome then? Well, so it sounds like you've got spleen qi deficiency for sure, which is like an insufficient amount of yang to transform the yin of your body. And so then things like parasites and stuff like that can kind of linger or not be able to be expelled. So that's what GU syndrome is often translated as, like parasitic syndrome, or like this is a kind of, this is probably why lots of practitioners don't use this diagnosis, because it can have several meanings, and it can be a little bit sound a little bit woo-woo and mystical, but I'll kind of try to give you my best explanation for it, and hopefully that will help you kind of understand. One of the older translations or first meanings of this word was like it was this insinuation that you had been possessed by like dark or mystical forces, and you had a hex on you, or some kind of like spell put on you, and you couldn't get rid of this problem. Like you just had these persistent health problems, and every doctor you would see would give you a treatment and it just wouldn't work. And so there's this kind of underlying thoughts that it's a very stubborn condition, that like you wouldn't sort of give that diagnosis up front. Like you wouldn't see a patient and they come in and you say, right, you've got that, because you would have already given them a diagnosis of spleen qi deficiency, and you've given them the standard formula for that, and that hasn't worked. And then you've given them this, you've tried everything that would normally work, and then as a practitioner, you'll be puzzled, thinking, why isn't this working? This doesn't make sense. This thing is just lingering on, and it's just so stubborn. So that's part of the GU syndrome. It can be parasitic infection or parasites in the body. And it can, but not all parasites are GU syndrome. So like if you went to Bali, I don't know if you have Bali near you, Indonesia is near Australia, a lot of people get what we call Bali belly. They go to, a foreign country and they just eat random foods, or they drink the water and it's not, safe to drink, and they don't know that. And then next thing you know, they have a parasitic infection, or they go swimming in an unusual place, and parasites, can sometimes even swim up into you. And so that, like, in that kind of case, you'd come home, or maybe even on the trip, you'd have extreme, like a food poisoning or something. You think, oh, I was so sick in the hotel, what a horrible trip. And then, you come home and you just can't get better, and you have this, like, part of the GU syndrome has this concept of like being hollowed out or being wasted away. So it can sometimes be used in really severe, like AIDS kind of situations that would maybe that pattern would fit with those kind of cases. Now, we don't even see those kinds of cases that much anymore because the medication for HIV is advanced so much that you don't see patients with sort of a hollowing out of their cheeks and, you know, really like emaciated and that kind of stuff. But that can be part of it, but it's not like, you know, all of what that goo syndrome is. So I guess it implies that the problem is tricky. It's been around, you know, you've probably tried a lot of formulas and it hasn't worked, and that's what it sounds like by your message there. And also, in a Chinese medicine sense, part of the diagnosis is this involvement of like a neurological aspect and a gut aspect. So you could have things like pain and some kind of digestive problem, or you could have things like mental problems, like, you know, anything in Chinese medicine that's a mental issue is related to your Shen. So it could be mental issue meaning sleep, like poor sleep, not able to sleep properly. Not something you've got mental illness, but you could have like, you know, neurological disturbance or something like that going on, like so in your nervous system, you know, pain or this. So pain, all these things relate to your Shen. So it's like a sensory perception. Pain is a sensory perception on in our body, and that's a Shen aspect. So it's got this kind of connection of your gut and your brain, you know, this gut-brain connection that Western medicine's only just coming to terms with. So yeah, going down that road of looking at parasitic kind of things, and I guess like there's different styles of Chinese medicine and there's different kinds of herbs. But when practitioners treat dampness, let's say not the goo syndrome, let's say, but just in general in dampness, there's lots of ways of treating that. So there's formulas where like we might use things that transform the damp or drain the damp, but then there's also ways of thinking about it like, okay, let's make the person's body as inhospitable to the damp as possible. So make the person's body warmer, make their digestive system warmer. So things like ginger, the strongest kind of ginger like paojiang or ganjiang are like the two herbs in Chinese medicine that we use when there's like, you know, extreme kind of loss of yang, I guess. And there's other warmer herbs that we use as well to kind of warm the gut and make it stronger, make it. And so when it's like in a Western medicine sense, when you've got that perfect balance of that bacteria there, then it's inhospitable to an overgrowth of other bacteria. So that would be a condition where you get like SIBO or something like that, where you've got this intestinal overgrowth of bacteria. Why is that happening? Because, you know, this in Chinese medicine is too much yin. The yin's like sort of growing out of control because the yang isn't controlling it. The yang isn't kind of strong enough to do that. So I hope that's answered your questions today. A little bit of a longer video than intended. That's always what happens. And so if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you've got a question about Chinese medicine, you'd like it answered, I can't reiterate enough that the purpose of this channel is to help you understand Chinese medicine, help you on your journey with your practitioner. You need to go and see a practitioner if you're not already and you've got these kind of health problems or you've got things going on that are undiagnosed. Don't let YouTube be a replacement for medicine. It's not a replacement for medicine. I can't be your practitioner through YouTube. And so you need to make sure that you ask your practitioner and talk to your practitioner about the things that are bothering you. And also to understand, you know, different ways that Chinese medicine can be utilized. There's some things you can do at home for self-help, but there's lots of stuff where it's not just a one thing that fixes it. There's, you know, a myriad of stuff involved in the mix of it. So thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next video soon.